Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for a virtual roundtable on how Trump's trade war has hurt Maine farmers. My name is Kathleen Marra, and I'm chair of the Maine Democratic Party. Joining us for this roundtable today are State Representative Craig Hickman, Spencer Aytel, dairy farmer from China, Maine, and Jenny Tilton Flood from Clinton, Maine. Thank you all so much for being with us today. When Trump ran for president, he made a lot of empty promises. One that he repeated over and over again was that we would beat China on trade. When he took office, his actual plan became clear. He intended to stoke a trade war with China, ratcheting up tariffs and adversarial rhetoric, with the belief that these tactics would help us beat them. In reality, it was just another broken promise, and his trade war utterly failed. As soon as Trump began to escalate the conflict and impose tariffs on Chinese goods, China retaliated. Since China is one of the US's top export markets, the tariffs they imposed were devastating to every part of the American economy. One sector that bore a particularly large burden from the tariffs was American farming. An estimate found that after the trade dispute erupted in 2018, American farm exports to China dropped by 53% and continue to drop in 2019. Here in Maine, our farmers were not spared the significant losses from the trade war. Our blueberry industry is a perfect example. Prior to Trump's presidency, Maine blueberry farmers were seeing skyrocketing sales and record profits. After Trump began his trade war, China issued an 80% retaliatory tariff on wild blueberries, which caused exports to plummet and has caused the blueberry industry in Maine to nearly vanish. And today, we'll be talking to a couple of dairy farmers who can speak to the impacts Trump's trade war has had on their pocketbooks. According to the Maine Dairy Association, Maine was home to more than 200 dairy farms that produce 71 million gallons of milk each year. But Trump's trade war caused dairy farms across the state to face an economic crisis. Last year, one economist estimated that the average Maine dairy farm could lose $50,000 because of Trump's harmful trade policies. A year ago, as Trump oversaw the collapse in American farm exports, he nonetheless declared the farmers were getting over the hump and predicted that by this time next year, farmers would be doing fantastically well. Where were we by the end of 2019? Farm bankruptcies in the US were up 20%, and farm debt had hit the highest number in American history. Seeing no progress this January, finally Trump accepted he lost his trade war and signed a phase one trade deal with China. But the deal left major issues unaddressed and hasn't fundamentally undone the damage his trade war caused. As an example of how far US farm exports have fallen, Trump set a goal of $33 billion in agricultural exports to China. As of May, just only 5 billion farm exports have been purchased. The evidence is clear. Because of this reckless trade war and insufficient de-escalation, Donald Trump has caused irreparable damage to the American agriculture. Today, we're joined by a number of guests who can give us a perspective on how Trump's failings have affected farmers here in Maine. In a moment, we'll hear from State Representative Craig Hickman, who is not only a state representative but a legislator from Winthrop, but he himself is an organic farmer. But first, I'd like to welcome Spencer Aytel, a dairy farmer from China, Maine, who can tell us how Trump's trade war has impacted his livelihood. Spencer, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kathleen. My wife and I, Paige Tyson, operate Tulun's farm in South China. We have 500 acres and milk cows for Organic Valley Co-op. And we have seen a lot of effect from the trade war. First of all, on conventional dairy, and which were tied inexorably to their markets as well. We've seen the broadening of the market. We used to have a reputation as a reliable supplier that could provide products to China and other countries on a steady basis. And with the tariffs, we've become an unreliable supplier in many ways, and the market has broadened, and it's unlikely to ever return to the single source that we had before, a great investment that we made to develop that market as dairy farmers, and that's kind of blown away. Our co-op in particular has a regional focus, as organic tends to, but we also have 20 countries that we sell products to. China was a major market, and we have a five-man team out there doing international sales. And one of them is stationed in China. Unfortunately, right now, the $20 million deal that we thought we had to do some products in China and the rollout of our branded products in China have been canceled. And he's doing most of his work trying to sell to other countries in the region. So we've lost a lot, and it's not just China. We lost our powder market in Mexico, and Canada hasn't bought anything as far as we're concerned. So this has been a major problem for us. We're not really sure what the future lies in organic milk, but I know in conventional milk, the whipsaw of prices has been horrific. And that's the view from China, Maine.
Thank you so much, Spencer, for sharing your story. Next, we're going to hear from another dairy farmer, Jenny Tilton Flood from Clinton, Maine. Jenny, it's all yours.
Hi, thank you so much, Kathleen, and thank you, Spencer. My name is Jenny Tilton Flood. I am one of a 3-generation, 6-family, 21 family member farm here in Clinton, Maine, which is Maine's dairy capital. We have 5 family farms in the town, various sizes, and we produce altogether 17% of Maine's milk. And that's milk that gets right on our neighbors' tables within 24 to 48 hours. And on our farm, we're also one of 800 farm family owners of the Cabot Creamery Cooperative. That's 800 farms and families throughout New England and New York that are working hard to make sure that we navigate these difficult waters together as a fleet, not as a singular boat. And like a lot of the farms throughout Maine, we are a member of a co-op that has depended greatly on diversifying our portfolio of business to help make sure that we are running our businesses well and supporting our farm and on-farm production. 12 to 17% of our co-op's business is dependent upon exports. And over the past 2 years, that export business has been decimated, as it has for a lot of other ag businesses throughout the country. And while that would be something that we could handle, it weakened us to the point that when we entered this black swan event of the COVID-19 crises, that it has made it difficult for us to continue to do our work. But I want to point out here for everybody that even though we've been kneecapped by trade wars and tariffs, and it has weakened us, the fact is that Maine's dairy farmers, all 199 of us in 15 of our 16 counties, have continued to work relentlessly to make sure that local, fresh, high quality milk has been put on the tables of our neighbors. And it doesn't just travel to Maine, it travels outside of Maine. Some of it comes back and some of it does find its way to foreign shores. And the reason we continue doing that is because it is something that needs to be done. We're not just feeding our neighbors, we're also driving the economy. We are the economic engines of Maine's rural landscape, and we're also protectors of that landscape. And when our trade business, that is part of our diversified portfolio, is hindered because of policies that work against us in the goal of benefiting entities that aren't us, then that weakens our ability to provide a resilient food system and be a part of that.
Thank you, Jenny. I really appreciate your sharing your story. Finally, I'd like to hand it over to State Representative Craig Hickman. Representative Hickman represents Winthrop and is serving his 4th term in the state legislature. Among his many other accomplishments in the legislature, where he's been a champion on efforts to protect small family farms, Representative Hickman is an organic farmer who owns and operates a sustainable farm raising organic produce, dairy, and livestock. Please join me in welcoming Representative Craig Hickman.
Thank you, Kathleen. It's a pleasure to be with everyone this afternoon. Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Spencer, for sharing your stories about the hardworking dairy farmers in Maine who are struggling. Before the pandemic, Trump's trade war with China was already hurting farmers, as you've heard. I am the chair of the Citizen Trade Policy Commission, and we have seen blueberry farmers and dairy farmers lose their markets in this insipid war that he has put upon us. You know, my father, who taught me how to grow food in our backyard garden in Milwaukee, died in 2007. And 2 years later, in his memory, I started growing food to sell at our roadside farm stand. And that experience compelled me to run for the legislature. And here we are. I am happy to say that I did run on ending hunger in our state. And in the last year of my last term, Governor Mills signed into law my bill to end hunger in Maine by 2030. That's a multifaceted effort that has a task force behind it. And one of the ways that we know we can help with that cause is to ensure that our Maine farmers are part of the solution. Nearly 14% of Maine households, including 1 in 5 children, just don't have consistent access to enough healthy food for a well-nourished and active life. That's why Maine Democrats continued the Maine is Feeding Mainers program this year by reauthorizing $2 million to be spent. That money goes directly into contracts that keep our farmers producing food for a market that is stable, and then that good local food gets put into the stomachs of our people here in Maine. We also know that our children need healthy food in school. That's why Maine Democrats passed a law providing matching funds to help schools buy farm food from local farms all over the state. Again, when farmers have regular markets, it helps them with their planning, and it helps their businesses remain resilient in their communities. Over the course of my 8 years in office, we have also strengthened the laws that would encourage all state-funded institutions, including universities and hospitals, to procure more food from Maine farmers and food producers. Labor has been a problem for Maine farmers for a long time, so we set up a farm labor link online that the department runs to link farmers with potential workers. And my signature legislation and policy initiative, Food Sovereignty, was put into law a few years ago, which has allowed municipalities to support resilient local food economies by encouraging small farmers and food producers to sell directly to consumers in their communities without necessarily having to have a full operation. Now, more than 80 towns in all 16 Maine counties have taken advantage of the Maine Food Sovereignty Act. And I have to say it's a blessing in this pandemic, as farmers of all sizes have had to adapt to those lost markets, both domestic and foreign, and serve the increased demand for local food in their communities. Trump claims to be on the side of farmers, but we have to go by his record. And his record shows that folks like Spencer and Jenny and other dairy farmers have been hurt by his failed trade war. I know what it's like to farm in Maine, even at the smallest scale. And I can tell you that Democrats in Augusta have been and will continue to fight for farmers. And when we send Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to the White House, they'll fight for Maine farmers too. So Kathleen, thank you again for inviting me today. And I'll turn it back to you to wrap up this discussion.
Thanks. Thanks so much for sharing that, Representative Hickman, and for your 8 years of hard work fighting for the people of Maine. The stories you just heard make one thing abundantly clear. Donald Trump's trade war has been destructive for Maine's farmers. And Maine is not alone. Across the country, farmers are speaking out about how Trump recklessly put their livelihoods in danger by escalating tensions with China. This is yet another reason why it's so clear that we must elect Joe Biden in November. Biden has a plan to not just end Trump's disastrous trade war, but to rebuild our farms and our rural communities back better than they were before. Biden's plan for rural America will strengthen our agricultural sector in a number of ways, by pursuing a less erratic trade policy with China and other countries, supporting beginning farmers, and reinvesting in land-grant universities, to name a few. The difference for our farmers between 4 more years of Trump and a new start with Joe Biden couldn't be more clear. Joe Biden believes the goal of every trade decision must be to build the American middle class, create jobs, and raise wages, and strengthen communities. His plan is to mobilize the talent, grit, and innovation of the American people to make sure the future is made in all of America by all American workers. Joe will continue to be one of America's workers' strongest allies as president, as he implements his Build Back Better plan, which won't only empower us to escape Trump's recession, but will put us on the path to creating a stronger, fairer economy than we've ever had before. With so many livelihoods hanging in the balance, we must do everything we can to make sure that Biden wins in November. If you would like to join the fight to defeat Trump, go to maindems.com/volunteer. That brings us to the end of our roundtable, and I'd like to thank Spencer, Jenny, and Representative Hickman for joining us, as well as to everyone who tuned in on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. There are 60 days until Election Day. Let's get to work.